In Glory America, I'm Hugh Hewitt, joined this morning by an old friend, Reince Priebus, former White House Chief of Staff, maybe the most successful Republican National Committee chair of the last 30 years. Reince, welcome back. Good to see you.
I'm glad to be here, Hugh. Thank you.
Let me begin with the breaking news, then we'll go to the deep dive into the first year of the Trump presidency. The breaking news is that in Friday's New York Times, it was alleged that you had talked to the president and urged him to fire John Kelly. Did that happen?
Well, that wasn't what was in the article. Yeah. The article simply said that we talked about it, and we didn't.
Oh, you did not?
No. Oh. The president's never complained to me about General Kelly. And on top of it, I would never, number one, he didn't do that. But number two, I would never bring up such a subject. I'm not going to sit around and talk about the management of the West Wing. That just didn't happen. I like John Kelly a lot. I think he's an American hero. It's a huge job. And I have to say, I used to say, what anyone thinks the job is, just multiply it by 50.
Yeah.
And but it is a huge job. And when a 4-star combat Marine says it's the hardest job he's ever had in his life, I think that means something. But no, the president doesn't complain to me about any of those sorts of things.
Did you, as Chief of Staff, know about the charges about Roger Porter?
No.
And so how is it that two chiefs of staff would not know? I know the answer to this, but why don't you explain how two chiefs of staff would not know about
I don't know about anything after I left.
Right.
But after 6 months, it's not bizarre to have a group of people that don't have their security clearance yet. So I had left after 6 months. It didn't rise to a level of, hey, this is what the situation is here. Now, we had other clearance issues where people hit a brick wall and they weren't going to get clearance. Some people smoked pot, things like that. But as far as this particular issue, I was surprised as anyone when that Daily Mail article came out. I didn't know Rob that way. He was always what everyone described.
No, I said Roger. I said his dad. It's Rob Porter. Yeah, I said Roger.
No, right.
Well, let me go back to when I was back in the White House days with Reagan. Young lawyers reviewed these raw, unredacted FBI files, and if they don't flag it for the deputy counsel, then it doesn't get flagged for the White House counsel, then it doesn't get flagged for the chief of staff. Do you think that's what happened here?
No, I just think they take time. You get a temporary security clearance. Just to give you an idea, I was probably one of the very first files to be sent in. I think maybe of anyone in the West Wing.
Sure.
At least I'm darn close. I got my temporary at the end of December. I don't think I got my actual permanent until April.
Okay.
And I have nothing. I've got no liens. I've got.
You're from Wisconsin. You're boring.
I don't have any lawsuits other than a few. Maybe I got a couple of speeding tickets a few years ago, but that's it. It just takes a long time.
Yeah. Let me turn to the special counsel investigation. You sat down with them, and you talked with Chuck about it last week. How long did you sit down with them for? What was that like?
I can't really talk about that, and I don't want to do that. So I don't want to be rude to you, but I'm not going to talk about anything that has to do with the investigation. I can't. I think you can understand.
Oh, I get that. But was it relaxed? Was it adversarial?
No, I think they were professional. They were polite. I never felt it wasn't something where I was being trapped.
Okay, and there's a new report this morning that Steve Bannon has been picked up on the Carter Page surveillance. I want to talk to you about this Carter Page FISA warrant in a second. But would you be surprised if you turned up on surveillance tape somewhere? Would that shock you? I guess I would.
I don't know if I'd be shocked, but I don't know to the extent of what was going on in that investigation. I was the RNC chairman, obviously, through the entire campaign. I've never met any of these folks that people are talking about, like Carter Page or George Papadopoulos. I don't know who they are. Never met them, at least as far as I can possibly remember.
Yeah.
So that's the extent of it for me.
It is reported you're still talking to the president a lot.
Well, I wouldn't say a lot. I talk to him. I care a lot about him and what he wants to do, but it's not my day-to-day life anymore.
Are you still talking to Steve Bannon?
I do once in a while. It's been maybe a week or so since I've talked to him last, but not a ton.
There are concerns. Everyone knows you're getting along well with the president, but there are concerns that the president and Steve Bannon are not getting along, and that therefore Steve Bannon may have very creative narratives to tell the special counsel. Do you share those concerns?
No, because I think that in the end, people are going to be honest with the special counsel. That's the whole point. I don't believe that. I think that when you sit down with the FBI, there is an aura of this is a serious discussion we're going to have, and there's no time for playing games. So
now, I want to talk to you about the FISA warrant on Carter Page. One last question about John Kelly. Did he make a mistake, and is it a firing mistake? Because I think more than 2 chiefs of staff in the first year would be a disaster.
I don't know what anyone really knew after I left, but you know, it's hard to say because I don't know what was discussed. I don't know the specifics. What I know, though, is the Rob Porter that we all knew in the West Wing. Yeah. It was one of those sort of moments where people just said, "You're kidding me. It can't. We're not talking about Rob Porter, are we? The Eagle Scout, Rhodes Scholar, Harvard undergrad. I mean, it was an incredible resume, but he was also very meek and polite and diligent. So I'm not saying that's an excuse for anything. I don't want anyone out there watching this thinking I am. I'm not. I'm just telling you.
You're shocked.
It was very surprising.
Yeah. Let me go then to the question at hand, the Carter Page FISA warrant. Devin Nunes was on my radio week, and I'll paraphrase. He said Hillary Clinton bought information from Russians that she then fed to the FBI for the purposes of getting a warrant on the Trump campaign. That's pretty close to exactly what he said. What do you make of this story, the other Russia story?
I make of it it's a political mess. It was a political mess from the very beginning. I mean, and there's no way when people say, you know, we can't insert politics into what's happening with these investigations. The problem is that it is political, and you can see it. People are people, and you see the text between the two folks having an affair. Politics is everywhere, and as much as we want to believe out there that somehow there is this iron wall between what happens in the DOJ or the intelligence community or, you know, what you name it, the EPA or the halls of Congress, it's all political. And it's impossible to subtract it. So for people to believe that there isn't a political piece is total naivete. And so it's troubling. I think it's really awful the way that this is all playing out. But I also agree that it doesn't taint the work I believe that Bob Mueller is doing on the other piece of the investigation. So I think you can have both. I think that can go on in an honest, honorable way, and you can be outraged by the fact that some of this may have been completely perpetrated because of politics. Yeah,
Secretary Clinton told me when I interviewed her on my radio show, you can hold 2 thoughts. One, that it's good that Mueller's doing his job, and it's terrible that the FBI, a handful of FBI people, acted this way. A couple of resignations at the Department of Justice as well.
But I think people need to understand that we can have this sort of intelligent conversation on a Saturday morning, these things. Yeah. But when you're living it every day in the West Wing, and the president has to put up with this 24/7, and he hears that this entire situation that now he's embroiled in, and others, like you know, all of us that work there, may have been started based on a political document paid for by political people. It's infuriating, and people have to understand that I think the president has a right to be infuriated.
You know, last week when you were talking with Chuck Todd on Meet the Press, you told him you'd never heard talk of firing Mueller. But the obvious follow-up from me a week later is, what's your recommendation to the president? Mine is, do not fire Mr. Mueller. Don't do that. That's a nightmare. What's your advice?
That would be my advice as well. I wouldn't fire Bob Mueller, but that presumes that the president needs that advice. He doesn't need that advice because he's not going to do it. And he never, at least to me, like I said, I never felt that was the situation I was in.
When you worked with the president, as you continue to talk with him, he has a unique decision-making style, which is very inclusive of lots of points of view. He's on the phone a lot. As chief of staff, that's got to be maddening. On the other hand, the results are pretty good.
Well, that's the point. And I think it's really important for people to understand that the president, his entire life, starting with a little bit of seed money from his dad to build up a $10 billion operation, to being the guy to go down the escalator, and maybe one of a few people in America that thought he was going to be president was himself, and he did it pretty much by himself. Now, what he does do, though, is he brings people around him, a desk like this, say it's an issue like trade. He has no problem, and I think he enjoys